The chandeliers in my ballroom glittered, reflecting off the champagne flutes raised in my honor. To a long and happy retirement, Mom, Laura said, her smile a touch too bright, a touch too wide. She handed me a glass of champagne, her fingers lingering on the stem a moment longer than necessary. I made sure it was your favorite vintage. I thanked her, my heart already heavy with suspicion. This party, this whole elaborate affair, felt less like a celebration and more like a passing of the torch. A torch I hadn't agreed to relinquish. Throughout the evening, I watched Melora and Darren, her fiancé, flitting among the guests, their whispers a constant hum beneath the music. They were playing a game, I realized, a game they thought I wasn't aware of. Darren caught my eye across the room and raised his glass in a mock toast, a smug glint in his eyes. Such a lovely party, Mother, Melora said, returning to my side. You've really outdone yourself. She gestured to the lavish spread, the sculptures, the string quartet playing softly in the corner. It was all, admittedly, quite extravagant, but I had earned it, built this life from the ground up. The thought of it slipping through my fingers, into their greedy hands, sent a chill down my spine. I'm so glad you're enjoying it, I replied, my voice even, betraying none of my inner turmoil. It's important to celebrate these milestones. Indeed, Melora purred, her eyes fixed on my untouched champagne, especially when there's so much to look forward to. There it was, the thinly veiled implication. My retirement, my stepping aside, their ascension. What exactly are you looking forward to, dear? I asked, taking a deliberate sip of water instead of the champagne. Melora laughed, a light, airy sound. Oh, you know, traveling, relaxing, spending more time with family. Her eyes flickered towards Darren, who was now deep in conversation with my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. That conversation didn't sit right with me either. Family is everything, I agreed, my gaze following hers. It's important to protect what matters most. The evening wore on, the music swelling, the conversations growing louder. I made the rounds, thanking guests, feigning joy. All the while, I kept a close eye on Melora and Darren. I watched them work the room, charming everyone with their smiles and empty promises. They were good. I had to give them that, but I was better. I had decades of experience, decades of watching people, learning their tells, their motivations, and I knew deep in my gut that Melora and Darren were not to be trusted. Later, as the party began to wind down, Melora approached me again, this time with a fresh glass of champagne. You haven't touched your drink, Mom, she said, her voice laced with concern. Let me get you a refill. That's thoughtful of you, dear, I replied, placing my hand over my glass. But I've had enough. I think I'll just have some water. Melora's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Are you sure? This is a special occasion. Quite sure, I said firmly. Perhaps you'd like it. I offered her my untouched glass. Her smile returned, brighter than ever. Don't mind if I do. She took the champagne from my hand, her fingers brushing against mine. It was a subtle touch, but I felt a chill run down my spine. I watched as she took a long, slow sip, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had me cornered. But I knew better. I had subtly switched the glasses earlier, when she wasn't looking. The champagne she now held, the one she had intended for me, was untouched. The one I had sipped from earlier, the one she believed to be harmless, held a different story. It wasn't poison, not in the traditional sense. It was a mild sedative, something to make her a little disoriented, just enough to loosen her tongue, to reveal her true intentions. As the effects began to take hold, Melora's movements became slightly clumsy, her words a little slurred. "You know, Mom," she said, leaning in conspiratorially, "Darren and I have big plans for the company." She giggled, a high-pitched, unsettling sound. "Once you're out of the picture, we're going to make some serious changes." My heart sank, but my face remained impassive. "Is that so?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Tell me more." Melora, now fully under the influence of the sedative, rambled on about their plans to restructure the company, to lay off employees, to sell off assets. She spoke of lavish vacations, of new homes, of a life of luxury funded by my hard work. Darren joined us, his eyes gleaming with avarice. "It's all falling into place, darling," he said, stroking Melora's hair. "Soon, it will all be ours." I listened, my stomach churning, my resolve hardening. They had underestimated me. They had thought I was old, frail, easily manipulated. They had no idea what I was capable of. I excused myself, leaving them to their drunken fantasies. I needed to make a phone call to put the next phase of my plan into action. They thought they were about to inherit my empire. They were about to learn a very valuable lesson. The game was far from over. It had just begun. The clinking champagne flutes and forced laughter echoed round my living room, a hollow soundtrack to my so-called retirement party. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this?" Melora asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "Giving up everything you've worked for, Darren, and I just want what's best for you." She squeezed my hand, a little too tightly. "Maybe a smaller place would be easier to manage at your age." I plastered a smile on my face. "Nonsense, darling. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." I took a sip of my champagne, the bubbles tickling my throat. Darren chimed in, his usual smooth salesman voice in full effect. "Of course, Mrs. Mother's last name do not fill. But wouldn't you rather enjoy your golden years without the stress of running a company? Melora and I are more than happy to lighten your load." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt more possessive than comforting. I excused myself, the charade becoming unbearable. In the kitchen, I surveyed the trays of canapes and desserts, the remnants of a life I was supposedly giving up. My gaze landed on the 2 champagne flutes I'd prepared earlier, one for Melora's mother, and one, identical in appearance, for myself. The slight difference, invisible to the naked eye, lay in a single, nearly tasteless additive I'd stirred into one of the drinks. It wouldn't cause any lasting harm, just a temporary discomfort, enough to reveal the truth hidden beneath the smiles and solicitous concern. I carefully picked up the correct glass and, with a deep breath, walked back into the living room. Melora and her mother were chatting by the fireplace, their heads bent together in conspiratorial whispers. I approached them, holding out the prepared flute. "Mrs. Melora's mother's last name do not fill," I said warmly. "I wanted to offer you a fresh glass of champagne. Yours seems to be getting low." She took the flute from me with a grateful smile. "Oh, how thoughtful of you, dear. You're such a wonderful hostess." Melora shot me a look, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it suspicion, or just annoyance at the interruption? Over the next hour, I made sure to stay close, observing Melora and her mother. They chatted animatedly, their conversation peppered with inside jokes and knowing glances. At one point, I overheard Melora's mother say, "It's all going according to plan, darling. Soon, it will all be ours." Melora nodded, her eyes gleaming. "He's completely oblivious," she murmured, presumably referring to Darren. "He thinks he's the one in charge." My heart sank. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just after the company, they wanted everything. My house, my savings, my entire life's work. The effects of the additive began to manifest subtly. Melora's mother started fanning herself, complaining of a sudden warmth. She excused herself to the powder room, her face slightly flushed. Melora followed her, concern etched on her face. A few minutes later, I heard a commotion from upstairs. Guests started murmuring, craning their necks to see what the fuss was about. Darren rushed upstairs, his face pale. I remained seated, calmly sipping my champagne, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. The chaos swirling around me felt distant, like a play unfolding on a stage. Soon, paramedics arrived, their flashing lights painting the living room in an eerie glow. Melora emerged from the upstairs bathroom, her face ashen. "It's her heart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She's never had any problems before." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and accusation. She said she felt dizzy after drinking the champagne you gave her. I met her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. "I'm so sorry to hear that, dear," I said softly. "I hope she recovers quickly." The paramedics wheeled Melora's mother out on a stretcher, Melora trailing behind them, her earlier confidence replaced by raw, palpable fear. Darren stayed behind, looking bewildered and slightly panicked. He approached me, his voice low. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. Do you think someone poisoned her?" I placed a comforting hand on his arm. "I'm sure it's just a coincidence." "Darren," I said, my voice soothing. "These things happen." As the last of the guests filed out, murmuring their goodbyes, I stood by the front door, watching them go. The party, meant to celebrate my retirement, had turned into something else entirely, a revelation, a confirmation, and the beginning of my countermove. The house was quiet now, the remnants of the party scattered round like fallen leaves. I walked into the kitchen, picked up the untouched champagne flute, and swirled the remaining liquid. I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't let them take what was mine. I would protect my legacy, even if it meant playing their game. And I knew just where to start. My safe deposit box held a little secret they wouldn't be expecting, a secret that would change everything. Rain lashed against the French doors of my sunroom, mirroring the turmoil churning inside me. My head throbbed, a dull ache that wouldn't subside, and my limbs felt strangely heavy, disconnected. "Mom, are you all right? You're so pale." Melora's voice, laced with what sounded like concern, cut through the fog in my brain. I blinked, trying to focus on her worried face. I don't know. Just a bit dizzy. I managed, gripping the arm of the wicker chair. The room, usually bright and airy, seemed to swim before my eyes. You should sit down, Mom. You've been on your feet all evening, Darren chimed in, his hand hovering solicitously over my shoulder. Let me get you some water. He moved towards the drinks table, a little too quickly, I thought. No, I'm fine, I insisted, though my voice wavered. The unsettling feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong, intensified. The party, my retirement party, was supposed to be a celebration, a joyous occasion marking the end of a long and successful career. But a creeping unease had settled over me since the beginning of the evening. Melora and Darren, usually so attentive, had been strangely distant, their smiles strained, their conversations hushed. Now, this sudden dizziness, this overwhelming weakness, it felt deliberate. I watched Darren return with a glass of water, his back to me for a moment as he poured it. My gaze, unbidden, fell upon the small, almost imperceptible residue on the rim of the glass he'd just used for my mother-in-law, Elsie. A sudden, chilling clarity pierced the fog in my mind. I recalled seeing Melora near Elsie's drink earlier, her hand lingering a little too long near the glass, the way she'd quickly moved away when I'd approached, the hushed conversation she'd had with Darren afterwards. It couldn't be, could it? Were they? My heart hammered against my ribs. Elsie, darling, are you feeling all right? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She smiled, a little dazedly, just a touch light-headed. Dear, must be the excitement, she chuckled, a weak, fluttery sound. Then, her laughter morphed into a cough, a harsh, racking sound that seemed to tear through her. She clutched at her throat, her eyes widening in alarm. Mom, Melora cried, rushing to Elsie's side. What's wrong? Her voice was sharp with panic, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a glint of something that looked suspiciously like triumph. I can't breathe, Elsie gasped, her face now mottled gray. Darren was beside her in an instant, his hand on her back, murmuring soothing words, but his eyes, too, held that same unsettling gleam. The room erupted in chaos. Guests clustered around Elsie, their voices rising in a cacophony of concern. Someone called for an ambulance. Melora, her face streaked with tears, looked at me accusingly. Mom, you should have done something. You just sat there. I looked at her, at Darren, at Elsie struggling to breathe, and the pieces finally clicked into place. The subtle digs at my age, the veiled suggestions that I stepped down from the company, the sudden concern for my well-being. They hadn't been planning just my retirement. They'd been planning my incapacitation, my removal. They wanted me out of the picture. They wanted my company, my house, everything I had worked my entire life to build. A wave of nausea washed over me, but this time, it wasn't from whatever they had tried to give me. It was from the sickening realization of the depths of their betrayal, my own daughter, my own son-in-law, as paramedics rushed in and began attending to Elsie. I retreated to the edge of the room, unnoticed in the chaos. My head still spun. My body still felt weak, but a new sensation was rising within me. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, hard resolve. They thought they had won. They thought they had me cornered. They were wrong. I knew their game now. I knew what they wanted, and I knew exactly how to stop them. I had built my empire from nothing. I had weathered storms far worse than this. They thought they could outmaneuver me, outsmart me. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated the lengths a mother would go to protect what was hers. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the rain-freshened air that wafted in through the open French doors. The dizziness began to recede, replaced by a chilling clarity. I would not let them win. I would not let them steal my future. I had a plan, a contingency they knew nothing about. And soon, very soon, they would learn just how wrong they had been to cross me. I opened my eyes, the faintest hint of a smile playing on my lips. The game, my dears, has just begun. Rain lashed against the windows of my home, a fitting backdrop to the turmoil churning inside me. The dizziness hadn't subsided, and the disjointed memories of the last few hours flickered like a faulty bulb. I don't understand, I stammered, clutching the arm of the paramedic. 1 minute I was talking to Darren, then nothing. He gave me a reassuring pat. "It's all right, ma'am. These things happen. Just try to relax. Relax." How could I relax when my own retirement party had become a blur of confusion and fear? Melora hovered nearby, her face a mask of concern. "Mom, are you sure you're okay? You went so pale. I thought you were," she trailed off, biting her lip. "I thought you were having a stroke." Her voice was laced with a tremor I couldn't quite decipher. Was it genuine worry, or something else entirely? I'm not sure," I whispered, my head still swimming. Everything's so hazy. The paramedics helped me to a chair, the plush velvet a strange contrast to the cold dread creeping into my heart. Darren fussed around me, offering a glass of water. "Here, Mom, this will help." I took a hesitant sip, my eyes fixed on his face. He avoided my gaze. That small gesture, that flicker of unease, was all the confirmation I needed. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a sudden dizzy spell. "Perhaps you should lie down, Mom," Melora suggested, her voice tight. "There's a guest room upstairs." I shook my head. "No. I need to stay here. I need to remember." Remember what? I wasn't even sure, but a nagging feeling, a deep-seated instinct, told me that something vital had been stolen from me, something more than just a few hours of memory. As the paramedics prepared to leave, I noticed Melora and Darren exchange a quick glance. It was swift, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a silent communication, a shared secret. My stomach lurched. What were they hiding? "Thank you," I said to the paramedics, forcing a smile. "I appreciate you coming." Once they were gone, the room felt strangely empty. Despite the lingering guests, the music, once lively and celebratory, now seemed to mock me, a hollow soundtrack to my growing unease. I saw Melora and Darren retreat to a corner, their heads together, whispering urgently. I strained to hear, but their voices were too low. "Everything all right, Mom?" Darren reappeared, his face carefully neutral. "You seem distracted." I met his gaze, my own expression unreadable. "Just tired." "Darren, it's been a long day." He nodded, a little too quickly, a little too eagerly. "Of course. Why don't you go upstairs and rest? We can handle everything down here." His words struck a discordant note. Handle everything? Handle what? Exactly. My company, my house, my life. The pieces began to click into place. hazy memories coalescing into a chilling realization. The hushed conversations I'd overheard, the veiled threats, the subtle manipulations. They thought I was fading, losing my grip. They thought they could take over. But they were wrong. This fog in my mind, this sudden illness, it wasn't natural. It was deliberate. And I knew exactly who was responsible. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, a cold, hard certainty that banished the lingering dizziness. They had underestimated me. They thought they could slip me something, steal my memories, and seize control while I was vulnerable. I watched them from across the room, Melora and Darren, their faces alight with a premature victory they hadn't yet earned. They were so focused on their own machinations, so convinced of their success, that they hadn't noticed the shift in my eyes, the hardening of my resolve. The dizziness was receding, replaced by a chilling clarity. I knew what I had to do. "Melora, Darren," I called out, my voice stronger than I expected. They turned, their smiles faltering as they met my gaze. "There's something I need to tell you both." They approached cautiously, their confidence visibly shaken. I let the silence hang in the air, thick with unspoken tension. They thought they had won. They thought they had me cornered. But I was just getting started. I allowed a small, knowing smile to play on my lips. "I remember now," I said softly, my voice laced with a steel they hadn't heard before. Their smiles vanished completely. The rain continued to batter against the windows, a relentless rhythm that echoed the storm brewing inside me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They had made a grave mistake, and they were about to pay the price. My retirement, my company, my life, everything they thought they could steal would remain firmly in my grasp. They thought they had outsmarted me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. 2 days. 2 days until my retirement party. A celebration I'd envisioned as a joyous occasion. Now it felt like a countdown to some unknown horror. Melora, my own daughter, had handed me a gift, a supposed sleep aid to help with my pre-party jitters. "Just a little something to help you relax, Mom," she'd said, her smile too wide, too bright. Even then, a flicker of unease had pricked at me, but I'd pushed it aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. Now, clutching the small bottle in my hand, the unsettling feeling had returned with a vengeance. I paced the living room, the ticking grandfather clock in the corner amplifying the silence of the house. I should have been finalizing the guest list, confirming the caterers, but my mind was a whirlwind of suspicion. Darren, Melora's fiancé, had been unusually attentive lately, his solicitousness bordering on suffocating. "Can I get you anything, Mrs. Peterson?" he'd ask, hovering like a nervous bird. "Are you sure you're feeling all right?" Their sudden, combined concern felt her chest-rated. I stopped by the window, watching the rain blur the streetlights into hazy halos. The gift bottle felt heavy in my palm. Why did Melora insist I start taking it immediately? "It takes a few days to build up in your system," she'd explained. "So you'll be sleeping soundly by the party." Sleeping soundly. The phrase echoed in my head, laced with a sinister undertone. My gut screamed at me to be cautious. Driven by a sudden impulse, I grabbed my purse and headed out into the storm. The pharmacy was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. I handed the pharmacist the bottle, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Could you tell me about this medication?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He examined the label, his brow furrowing slightly. "It's a relatively new sleep aid," he said, tapping a few keys on his computer. "Fairly strong. Are you experiencing any side effects?" "Not yet," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "I haven't taken it." He continued scrolling through the information on his screen. "HMM," he murmured, a note of concern in his voice. "There's a warning here about potential interactions with other medications. Are you taking anything else?" I listed my usual vitamins and supplements, my anxiety growing with each passing second. He shook his head. "Nothing that should cause a problem," he said, "but it mentions a rare but serious reaction if combined with a here is a specific type of unregulated herbal compound." My blood ran cold. An unregulated herbal compound. A few weeks ago, Melora had given me a new all-natural tea blend, claiming it would boost my energy. "It's a special blend from a local apothecary," she'd said, her eyes gleaming with an almost unnatural enthusiasm. "It's supposed to be amazing." I'd been drinking it every day, enjoying the subtle, earthy flavor. Now, the taste seemed to turn to ash in my mouth. "Is something wrong?" the pharmacist asked. Noticing my sudden pallor, I forced a weak smile. No, everything's fine," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for your help." I practically fled the pharmacy, the rain now a chilling reminder of the danger I was in. Back in the safety of my car, I slumped against the steering wheel, my mind racing. It couldn't be a coincidence. The sleep aid, the herbal tea, the sudden concern from Melora and Darren, it all pointed to a terrifying conclusion. They were trying to poison me. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with sickening clarity. They wanted me gone. Gone from the company, gone from my house, gone from my life. They wanted my retirement, my assets, everything I had worked so hard for. The thought of it made my stomach churn. How could my own daughter do this to me? How could I have been so blind? The rain continued to fall, blurring the world outside into an indistinct gray. But inside, a different kind of storm was gathering, a storm of anger and resolve. They wanted a fight. They were going to get one. I wouldn't let them steal my life. I wouldn't let them win. I would find a way to expose their treachery, to protect what was mine, and I would make them pay for what they had done. The retirement party was just 2 days away. It was time to start planning my own surprise. Rain lashed against the windows, mimicking the turmoil inside me. The doctor had just left, his face etched with professional concern. Temporary memory loss, likely stress-induced, he'd murmured, patting my hand. And the tremors, "We'll need more tests." Stress-induced. He had no idea. "I appreciate your time, doctor," I managed, my voice a thin thread, as the door clicked shut. The silence of the house pressed in, heavy and suffocating. I reached for the crystal decanter on the sideboard, then hesitated. Darren, ever solicitous, had filled it with my favorite sherry just that morning. "Mother, you deserve to relax," he'd said, his smile almost too bright. "Let me take care of everything." That sherry was it before or after the dizziness started, before the world began to tilt, the faces around me blurring into grotesque masks. The retirement party, A kaleidoscope of flashing lights and forced smiles was a hazy memory now. Fragments, like shards of broken glass, pricked at the edges of my consciousness. Melora, radiant in a shimmering gown, raising a toast. To my mother, she declared, her voice ringing with false affection. May her retirement be long and happy. Had she slipped something into my drink? The thought, once a fleeting suspicion, now solidified into a cold, hard certainty. I wandered through the echoing rooms of my house, a place that had once felt like a sanctuary, now imbued with a chilling sense of unease. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret. Every corner whispered of betrayal. I clutched my robe tighter, the silk cold against my skin. The doctor had prescribed rest, but sleep was a distant impossibility. My mind raced, trying to piece together the missing hours. What had happened after Melora's toast? I remembered a sudden wave of nausea, the room spinning violently. Then a thing, a blank canvas where memories should have been. Had I collapsed? Had Darren carried me to my room? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I stumbled upon a half-finished game of chess in the library. The pieces were scattered across the board, frozen mid-move. My hand hovered over the white queen, a familiar weight in my palm. Chess had always been my refuge, a place where I could strategize, plan, and ultimately conquer. This time, the game felt different. The stakes were higher. My opponent wasn't across the board, but within the walls of my own home. Melora, Darren, their smiles, their solicitous gestures, their carefully crafted words, all a facade, concealing a darker purpose. They wanted my company, my house, my life. I picked up my phone, my hand trembling. I needed an ally, someone I could trust. My fingers hovered over the contact list, scrolling past names that suddenly felt unfamiliar, tainted with doubt. Then I saw it. Amelia. The screen read the name of my longtime lawyer and confidant. I pressed the call button, my heart pounding in my chest. Amelia. It's me, I whispered, my voice raspy. Something's happened. I need your help. There was a pause, a moment of stunned silence. Then, Amelia's voice, calm and reassuring, filled the line. Tell me everything. I spent the next hour recounting the events of the past few days, my voice trembling with emotion. Amelia listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with a pointed question. By the time I finished, the first rays of dawn were filtering through the curtains. I felt drained, emotionally and physically, but a flicker of resolve began to burn within me. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them steal what I had worked so hard to build. I have a plan, I said, my voice gaining strength. I need you to help me execute it. Amelia didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. My plan was audacious, risky, but it was the only way I could see to regain control. It hinged on a secret, a hidden clause in my company's bylaws that even Melora and Darren weren't aware of. A clause that gave me the power to appoint a temporary CEO in the event of my incapacitation. And I knew just the person for the job. I need you to draw up the paperwork immediately, I instructed Amelia. And I need you to be discreet. Absolutely no one can know about this until the time is right. Amelia assured me she would handle everything. As I hung up the phone, a sense of calm washed over me. The pieces were falling into place. The game was far from over. In fact, It was just beginning. I looked out the window, the rain having subsided, leaving behind a world washed clean. The rising sun cast a golden glow on the landscape, a promise of a new day, a new beginning, and this time I would be playing by my own rules. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. The woman staring back was pale, her eyes shadowed with fatigue, but there was a glint of steel in her gaze. They thought they had me beaten. They thought they could take everything I had built. They were wrong. They had underestimated me, and they would pay the price. I reached for a small, antique jewelry box on the vanity, a gift from my late husband. Inside, nestled amongst the pearls and diamonds, was a single key, a key to a safe deposit box, containing not only my most valuable possessions, but also a document that would change everything. I slipped the key into my pocket, a small, cold weight against my skin. The game was on. The sterile, antiseptic smell of the doctor's office did little to calm my nerves. "It's probably just stress," Dr. Ramirez said, patting my hand. "Retirement can be a big adjustment." He'd run a battery of tests on Silas, my husband, after the incident at my retirement party. Silas had been fine 1 minute, toasting my new chapter, and the next he was clutching his chest, gasping for breath. The paramedics arrived quickly, thankfully, but the fear that gripped me as they wheeled him away hadn't left. "Are you sure it's nothing more serious?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "All the initial tests came back normal," Dr. Ramirez reassured me. His blood pressure was a bit elevated, but that's understandable given the circumstances. I wasn't so easily convinced. The way Silas had collapsed, so suddenly it felt wrong. He'd been perfectly healthy. Could it have been something he ate or drank? I pressed, the thought nagging at the back of my mind. The doctor sighed. "Mrs. Caldwell, it's highly unlikely. I understand you're concerned, but sometimes these things happen." He smiled gently, but I could see the dismissal in his eyes. He thought I was a worried wife overreacting to a minor health scare. "I'd still like to be absolutely certain," I insisted. "Would it be possible to run a toxicology screen just to rule everything out?" Dr. Ramirez hesitated, his pen hovering over his notepad. "It's an extra expense, and as I said, it's likely unnecessary. I'm happy to cover the cost," I said firmly. "Peace of mind is priceless." He finally relented, writing out the order. "Fine, Mrs. Caldwell, but I doubt it will show anything conclusive." I nodded, a small, tight smile playing on my lips. "We'll see, doctor. We'll see." As I left the office, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago, the number of a private lab I'd used discreetly during some delicate business negotiations. "Hello, Dr. Chen. It's Amelia Caldwell. I need a favor." I explained the situation, emphasizing the need for complete discretion and a speedy turnaround. "Of course, Mrs. Caldwell. Send the samples over, and I'll prioritize it personally." The following days were filled with a forced calmness. I visited Silas in the hospital, fielding questions from Melora and Darn about his condition. Melora was overly solicitous, fluttering around Silas's bedside, bringing him flowers and fussing over his pillows. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" she asked me, her voice full of concern. You look pale. I'm just tired, dear, I replied, giving her a reassuring smile. Don't worry about me. Darren, ever the dutiful fiancé, chimed in. Perhaps you should take a break, Amelia. We can handle things here. That's kind of you, Darren, I said. But I want to be here for Silas. The truth was, their concern felt suffocating. Their eagerness to take charge felt premature. I knew I couldn't let on to my suspicions. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed to know if what I feared was true. Had Melora and Darren orchestrated this? Had they tried to hasten my retirement? Perhaps invent something worse? 2 days later, Dr. Chen called. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, his voice low, I have the results of the toxicology screen. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I asked, barely able to breathe. There was a substance detected. He confirmed, a benzodiazepine. Not a lethal dose, but enough to cause respiratory distress, particularly in someone with underlying heart conditions. Silas didn't have any underlying heart conditions. Are you certain? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Absolutely, Dr. Chen replied. I've double-checked the results myself. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Benzodiazepines, a drug used to treat anxiety, insomnia. I thought back to the retirement party, to the champagne flutes, to the way Melora had insisted on refilling my and Silas's glasses. Just a little top-up, Dad, she'd said, her smile bright. Now, that smile seemed chillingly calculated. I knew what I had to do. I had to protect myself, protect my company, protect everything I'd worked so hard to build. I wouldn't confront them directly. Not yet. I needed a plan, something subtle, something that would expose their treachery without revealing my hand. I needed to play the long game. I needed to make them think they were winning, right up until the moment they lost everything. The next morning, I visited Silas again. He was looking much better, the color returning to his face. Feeling better, darling? I asked, kissing his forehead. Much better, he replied, squeezing my hand. The doctors are still baffled, though. They can't explain what happened. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. Don't worry, Silas. I think I have a few ideas. I looked at him, a new resolve hardening my gaze. And when I'm done, everyone will know the truth. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my garden, the same garden I'd painstakingly cultivated over the past 20 years. Little Lily was helping me, her small hands enthusiastically scattering more dirt than seeds. Grandma, she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. Why did Mommy say you needed to rest permanently? My trowel clattered against the terracotta pot, a jarring sound in the otherwise peaceful garden. I forced a smile, my heart hammering against my ribs. Oh, darling, Mommy just meant I needed a long vacation. Lily tilted her head, her bright blue eyes, so much like Melora's, staring intently at me. But Daddy said you wouldn't be coming back from this vacation, she continued, innocently picking up a worm and dangling it in front of my face. He said you'd be with the angels. My blood ran cold. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Melora and Darren weren't just hoping I'd retire. They were planning for me to be gone, permanently. My own daughter, the one I'd nurtured, supported, even handed a significant portion of my company to. wanted me dead. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I knelt down, forcing myself to meet Lily's innocent gaze. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Sometimes grown-ups use funny words. They don't always mean exactly what they say. I scooped her up in a hug, burying my face in her soft hair, trying to mask the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. "Why don't we go inside and have some lemonade?" I asked, my voice brighter than I felt. Inside, I settled Lily in front of the television, her attention quickly captured by a cartoon. My mind raced. I needed to act, to protect myself, but how direct confrontation would be messy, and I had no concrete proof. Besides, Melora was a master manipulator. She'd twist the narrative, make me look like the unstable one. I paced the length of the living room, the elegant Persian rug suddenly feeling like a cage. I needed a plan, something subtle, something that would expose their treachery without putting myself at risk. My gaze fell on the framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a picture of Melora and Doran on their wedding day, beaming at me, their faces full of what I had then believed to be love and gratitude. Now, looking at the picture, all I saw was deceit. Below the photograph sat a small, antique music box, a gift from my late mother. It was inlaid with mother of pearl and played a delicate, haunting melody. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, the smooth surface a comfort against my trembling fingers. An idea began to form, a seed of a plan taking root in the fertile ground of my anger and fear. The next few days were a blur of activity. I spent hours in the library, poring over legal documents, familiarizing myself with the intricacies of my will and the complex structure of my company. I met with my lawyer, making subtle changes, adding safeguards, ensuring that my assets were protected. I even consulted a private investigator, discreetly gathering information about Melora and Darren's activities. I learned that they had been meeting with a rival company, discussing a potential merger, a merger that would effectively dismantle everything I'd built. They hadn't even waited for me to be permanently resting before plotting to sell off my life's work. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I smiled, I laughed, I played with Lily, all the while carefully observing Melora and Darren, watching for any sign of suspicion. They, however, seemed oblivious to my machinations, too caught up in their own greed and ambition. They continued to visit, their conversations filled with veiled suggestions about my health, their eyes gleaming with barely concealed anticipation. "Mom," Melora would say, her voice dripping with false concern, "are you sure you're feeling all right? You seem tired." Darren would chime in, his tone equally solicitous. "Perhaps you should consider moving into an assisted living facility. It would be so much easier for you." I'd smile sweetly, assuring them that I was perfectly fine, enjoying my retirement, tending to my garden. Inside, however, my resolve hardened. They would not succeed. I would not let them steal what I had worked so hard to create. One evening, while Melora and Darren were visiting, I casually mentioned a trip I was planning, a cruise to the Mediterranean. "I've always wanted to see the Greek islands," I said, my voice filled with feigned excitement. "I've already booked the tickets, first class all the way." Melora's eyes widened, a flicker of greed crossing her face. That sounds wonderful, Mom, she stammered, her forced smile not quite reaching her eyes. But are you sure you're up for it? It's a long trip. Oh, I'm sure I'll be fine, I replied, my voice light and airy. I've even arranged for a private nurse to accompany me, just in case. The look on Melora's face was priceless. She clearly hadn't anticipated this. Her carefully laid plans were unraveling, and she didn't know what to do. I watched her, a sense of grim satisfaction filling me. The game was far from over, but I was finally starting to gain the upper hand. I had planted the seed, and now I would watch it grow, nurtured by their own greed and deception. The Mediterranean cruise was a fiction, of course, a carefully crafted illusion designed to lull them into a false sense of security. My real destination was far closer to home, a place where I could quietly watch their elaborate scheme crumble around them. I had one more card to play, a final, devastating move that would ensure they never threatened me or my legacy again. And I couldn't wait to see the look on their faces when they realized just how badly they had underestimated me. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my living room carpet. Darren, ever the picture of polite concern, sat opposite me, a folder of documents spread neatly on the coffee table. I hope you're feeling better, Mrs. Caldwell, he said, his voice smooth as honey. Melora sends her love, of course. She's so sorry she couldn't be here herself, but she had a last-minute meeting. I gave a small, tight smile. Meetings are important, I replied, my gaze fixed on the folder. What are these, Darren? Just some paperwork. A formality, really, he explained, pushing the folder closer. Standard transfer documents. To streamline things, you know, since you've decided to step back. He avoided my eyes, focusing on the top sheet. Melora thought it best to have everything in order, so you don't have to worry about these things during your recovery. Recovery, such a delicate word for what they'd done to me. For weeks, they'd been slowly poisoning me, chipping away at my memory, my health, hoping I'd simply fade away. They'd even convinced my doctor I was experiencing early-onset dementia. My own daughter plotting against me with the help of her charming fiancé. I picked up the top document, pretending to scan it. Transfer of ownership, quite comprehensive. My voice was calm, almost detached. Darren shifted uncomfortably. Yes, well, as Melora explained, it's for the best. She's more than capable of running the company now. And of course, we'll ensure you're taken care of. He gave a nervous laugh. The best care. We're family, after all, family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I placed the document back on the table, my fingers tracing the embossed letterhead of Caldwell Enterprises, the company I'd built from the ground up. Tell me, Darren, I said, my voice soft. Did Melora also explain to you about the offshore account? His smile faltered. Offshore account? He blinked, genuinely confused. I'm not sure what you mean. I leaned back in my chair, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. It's a rather substantial sum, I explained, my voice light and conversational. Set aside years ago, for a rainy day, shall we say. I watched as his eyes widened, the cogs in his mind visibly turning. He clearly hadn't known about this. Melora hadn't told him everything. I see, he stammered, his composure beginning to crack. I'll have to ask Melora about that. Oh, I wouldn't bother, I said, my voice hardening. She doesn't know about it either. See, Darren, I learned a few things during my recovery. Things about loyalty, about trust, and about how quickly people show their true colors when they think you're no longer in the picture. I picked up the documents again, this time letting them fall to the floor with a soft thud. These, I said, gesturing to the scattered papers, are meaningless. Caldwell Enterprises isn't just a company, Darren. It's my legacy, and it will go to someone who deserves it. Someone who hasn't tried to steal it from me piece by piece. He stared at me, speechless, his face pale. The carefully constructed facade of concern had crumbled, replaced by a mixture of fear and bewilderment. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. I believe you have a meeting to get back to, Darren, I said, my voice ice cold. Please, give Melora my regards. Tell her I'll be in touch. He scrambled to gather the scattered documents, his hands shaking. He didn't meet my gaze as he backed away towards the door, muttering something about needing to leave. I watched him go, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over me. They thought they had won. They thought they had me outsmarted. They had no idea what I had planned. They had no idea about the true extent of my resources. They hadn't accounted for one crucial thing, a mother's instinct to protect what is hers. And I had just begun to fight. They thought the game was over. It was just getting started. Tomorrow, I make my move. Tomorrow, they learn the true meaning of the word payoff. Sunlight streamed through the windows of my living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a stark contrast to the shadowed anxieties that had filled the room last night. Melora and Darren hadn't stayed long after the paramedics took Mrs. Peterson away. We need to be with her, Melora had said, her voice tight. Let us know if you need anything. Darren just gave me a curt nod. His eyes narrowed. Now, they were due back any minute, probably to resume their demands about my health and the best interests of the company. The doorbell rang, a shrill announcement of their arrival. Come in, I called, my voice steadier than I felt. Melora entered first, Darren trailing behind her. Mom, how are you feeling this morning? Melora asked, her voice laced with a false concern that grated on my nerves. I'm fine, dear, I replied, keeping my tone even. A little shaken, but fine. Darren cleared his throat. About last night, quite a scare. It really brings home the fact that you need to finalize those arrangements. For your own peace of mind, yes, Mother, Melora added. We just want what's best for you. She placed a folder on the coffee table in front of me. We revised the paperwork, simplifying everything. Just sign here, and we can put all this behind us. My lawyer, Silas, whom I'd called immediately after they left last night, had just arrived. He entered the living room, a small, almost apologetic smile on his face. Good morning, everyone. Mrs. Peterson called and asked me to stop by. Melora stiffened. Mrs. Peterson. Why would she? Silas held up a hand. She's resting comfortably at home now. Seems it was a severe allergic reaction to something she ate earlier in the day. Not a stroke as everyone initially feared. He gave me a knowing look. My heart pounded in my chest, but I maintained a calm facade. That's a relief. Darren shifted uneasily. So, About these documents, he gestured towards the folder Melora had placed before me. Silas picked it up. I believe these are the same documents I reviewed yesterday. He opened the folder and flipped through the pages, his expression growing grim. Yes, Melora said quickly. We've just streamlined them a little, made them easier for Mom to understand. Silas closed the folder with a snap. Easier to understand. Perhaps easier to exploit. Most definitely. He looked directly at Melora and Darren. These documents, Ms. Melora and Mr. Darren, effectively sign over all of your mother's assets, her home, her company, her retirement accounts to the two of you. They grant you full power of attorney, allowing you to make all financial and medical decisions on her behalf. And they include a clause that conveniently absolves you of any liability should something unfortunate happen to her. Melora's face paled. That's not how it is at all. Darren's face flushed crimson. We're just looking out for her, he blustered. Silas ignored their protests. He turned to me. I've already drafted a cease and desist letter outlining the legal ramifications should they attempt to coerce you into signing anything further. I've also contacted the authorities regarding last night's incident with Mrs. Peterson. Given her sudden recovery and the circumstances surrounding it, a thorough investigation is warranted. The blood drained from Melora's face. Incident, she whispered. I met her gaze, my voice quiet but firm. The incident where you switched our drinks. Melora, I saw you. You thought you were giving me the drug champagne meant for Mrs. Peterson, a convenient scapegoat with a history of health problems. But I anticipated your move. I gestured to the seemingly identical glasses on the side table. I switched them back. You poisoned your own mother-in-law. Darren stared at Melora, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. Melora, is this true? Melora's eyes darted between Darren and me, a flicker of panic in their depths. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Silas cleared his throat. I believe we're done here. He ushered Melora and Darren towards the door, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. As the door clicked shut behind them, I sank back onto the sofa, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. The fight was far from over, I knew, but for now, I had won. My company, my home, my future, they were all still mine. And the look on Melora's face as she realized her plan had backfired, that was a victory in itself. But what about Darren? Would he stand by Melora? Or would this revelation shatter their carefully constructed facade? I had a feeling this story was far from over.